Hi and welcome back. I'm Emily from the Pencil Room Online, and this is a second in a series of free Learn to Draw classes for beginners. If you've already watched the first class, you'll know that we looked at just drawing different types of lines, how to draw straight lines, curved lines, and really what we were focusing on is using our hand in a different way, either using it from the wrist or using it from the elbow, and just seeing what that felt like. This week we're going to start sketching, and we're going to start with basic shapes. You've probably seen this in a lot of Learn to Draw courses. We start with cubes and cylinders and circles or spheres. And you might be really keen to get on to draw something realistic, but this is a really important class because when we're drawing anything, we need to start with a foundation sketch or something to put down on the paper first, something to simplify what we're looking at, and that's what we use these simple 3D shapes for. So let's get started. You're going to need a pencil, just an HB pencil is fine, whatever you've got, and maybe an eraser, but again, like last time, we're going to try not to use that if we can help it. To start with, we want to be able to use our pencil in a way to create a light and a loose line. And instead of drawing one straight line like this, we're going to move our hand across the page, and we're just going to draw a series of small, light, kind of feathery lines. And the reason we use lines like this is it means they're easy to edit. We can rub things out, we can go over top of them darker if we need to. So just have a go at that. You're using kind of this motion. You can work from the wrist, or if you're feeling confident, you can work from the elbow. You see my hand is moving across the page now. And each line joins up with the one before it. Now we're going to try and get a straight line if you can. I'm going to use my right hand just to show you what this might look like for you if you are just starting out, and your dominant hand is probably much more coordinated than my right hand. You see they sort of overlap. It doesn't matter if you get these disjoins here. Make sure you're keeping the pressure fairly light on the paper. And then we're going to use that movement to just draw some simple squares. So you can see I'm not drawing just one single straight line, but I'm kind of just carefully lining up a series of straight lines that overlap each other. And in working this way, it's a lot easier to get a straight line. If you try to draw something like this, you might get a straight line, but sometimes you might not, or it might be a little bit wonky. This is quite difficult to edit because it's so dark and hard. If you keep drawing squares, but if you drew something like this, well, I can just sketch the correction over top. And then it's easy to rub out those loose, light lines there. So draw some squares across your page, trying to keep that freedom of movement. And of course, each side should be parallel to the other. The top should be parallel to the bottom. You can try some bigger squares or rectangles. And there'll be a direction that feels more comfortable for you, whether it's working up or working down. You might have discovered that from the last lesson. You can turn your page around if you need to as well. See that nice, fresh, straight line there. So what we're looking for is a series of loose overlapping lines that you can easily correct by going over top. And if this was an actual sketch that we're doing, once you've done these nice loose lines and you've got everything you want in your drawing, then you can go over top if you want to. It might not suit the subject. So we've done squares, let's have a go at doing some circles. And I do have a video on how to draw circles. You might want to look at that. and there's 3 different ways I think in that video of how to draw circles. So if you're really struggling, that would be a video to go to, but otherwise just have a go using that same kind of movement, nice and loose. I am moving from my elbow, but you could be moving from your wrist if you're drawing quite small. The problem is when you go bigger, you really do have to work from your elbow, because you just can't cover that same amount of space just working from your wrist. So it's good to practice both. So same thing, if something goes wrong, so say I've got like this little bump here, or it's almost like an angle, I've been using such light lines that I can just sketch around and correct it. And this starting point of a drawing, when you're doing this initial sketching, it shouldn't be tidy and perfect. Well, I don't think it should be anyway. So try not to be hard on yourself. You know, if it's looking really messy, like this one's looking pretty messy when I think about it, but it's a pretty good circle. You know, it's round, and that's what we want. Just like the other lessons, this lesson we are going to do a bit of practice, and then I'm going to give you a little assignment to do so you can practice in your own time as well. You see I'm changing directions. You could go back and forth. So really try to discover what method works for you. Is it better for you to just use your wrist and do small circles or small marks like this at the moment? Can you, do that first and then do larger curved marks around there to get something a little bit more flowing? Maybe you can even use the hula hoop method. If you're just starting out, it's pretty tricky. I usually swap to my right hand when I'm trying to see what it's like for complete beginners. It'll feel strange anyway. You can try different directions as well. So we've done squares, we've done circles, but what's more useful than a circle is an ellipse, or kind of like an oval. So this sort of shape, this is what you'll see at the top and the bottom of cylinders. And this is where that hula hoop method is most useful, because you can very quickly draw some ellipses. So I'd encourage you to try and practice that hula hoop method. If you do find that really difficult, then you can still use this sketching method. Figure out the placement of it first, or the shape of it first, and then go over top. This hula hoop method, probably one of the most valuable skills you can practice when you're beginning, I think. It's just about getting a rhythm going. And these are all kind of the same relative proportions. I could do some that are more like closer to a circle, or I could do some that are very, very narrow. So as we did in the last lesson, I want you to have a look at what you've done. Really think about what's working for you, what you might need to work on. Remember, this is not a judgment of whether it's good or bad. It's just observations. So what is working? What do you maybe need to practice some more? You could talk about how straight your lines are. If you find that when you're moving in a particular direction, they go a little bit crooked, then either you avoid working in that direction, or you need to practice working in that direction. I'm actually pretty happy with most of mine here. This one here, this was using the wrist, and it looks a bit forced. It doesn't look natural like these other ones. So these are all from the elbow. Elbow equals natural looking. But you have a look at your marks and write down what you observe. Sometimes what I find when I'm doing these lines is they all go in one kind of angle. These are actually pretty straight. This one's coming down a little bit. Actually, this one's coming down a little bit as well. So that's something to note, just the natural way of moving. And you can correct that. Something that makes sense to you, just a small observation there. Okay, so we've drawn some squares and we've drawn some circles and some ellipses. The squares are now going to become cubes, They could be rectangle cubes or square cubes, and the ellipses are going to become cylinders. And if you have a look around you, wherever you're sitting right now, you should be able to find something that is a cube shape or a cylinder shape. I mean, I'm sitting at a table. The top of this table is a really long cube shape. I've got these cylinder shapes here that hold my pencils and my paintbrushes. Basically everything around me is has some kind of cylinder or cube as part of it, and so that's why they're really important shapes to be able to draw. I'm going to start with a square, and we're going to turn it into a cube, and all we're going to do is we're going to put an angle out here, angle here. Now these angles have to be exactly the same, and this one at the bottom here, so they are parallel to each other. And then we're going to draw a line across the back which is parallel to the front line. This one here is parallel to this back edge. So if it's looking a little bit wonky, mine actually is looking a little bit wonky, it'll be because something is not parallel with its partner. So we've got width, these ones, we've got height, these ones, and then we've got depth, which is these two that go back, or 1, 2, 3 actually go back into the distance. This is the front of the cube, the top of the cube, and the side of the cube. And depending on where you are in position to whatever you're looking at, you're going to be able to see more of the top or more of the side. So if we take a look at this cube here, when you're looking at it straight on, you can only see the front. But when it's, say, down on a table, which is where most people will be looking at things from, you'll be able to see the top and you'll be able to see one side. We're looking at it sort of like this at the moment. We can see the top and we can see one side, and we can also see the front. We're just going to go across here and draw a series of cube shapes, starting with the very front shape. It could be a rectangle or a square. This one's a square, this one's a rectangle. And the angles going back can go this way or they can go the opposite way. And I'm sort of making mine, I guess, about 45 degrees at the moment. Try different shapes. Keeping that nice loose sketching mark where you're doing the line several times. You could play around with changing the angle. So say this one here, I can see more of the top. It's like it's a lot lower down, and you can see more of the top than when it's higher up. But for each one, the lines need to be parallel. All of the angles need to be parallel. All of the straight lines need to be parallel with each other. This one, 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 this one. So they're not pairs, actually. The lines are in triplets. 3 lines, exactly the same angle, 3 vertical lines, and 3 horizontal lines. And remember, using these nice light sketching lines, you can correct things. So, you do something that's a little bit, it's a really wonky one. Something obviously wrong with that. Then you're going to go through and just draw over top. You don't even need to rub anything out at this stage. You might need to draw a little bit darker. Because if you keep rubbing things out, especially when you're starting, you're not going to get anywhere. You're just going to keep doing the same mistake over and over again. At least when I've done this, I can see where I needed to correct it. I've corrected it, and then I can rub things out. You could draw it so you can see the bottom of the box as well. I'm mostly just doing the top of the box because when we move on to drawing some objects, most of the things that you'll be drawing will be on a surface and you'll be able to see the top of them. But sometimes you might only be able to see a little bit of the top. So our eye level is closer to it. We're looking at this from further down or lower down. You can see I've only shown a tiny bit at the top by changing the angle, making the angle a lot shallower. So those are our cubes, and you really need to practice those until you can draw them so that they look like cubes. They don't look wonky. So you can get those lines parallel to each other in the first go. You might need some minor corrections, but if you're really struggling with that and getting your head around it, that is something that you definitely need to practice. Moving on to cylinders, and we're going to use those nice loose ellipses, moving from the elbow if you can. We're going to draw one ellipse, and then we're going to draw another one beneath it and trying to get it exactly the same. And if you want, you can start with the sides first. So I've created a cylinder here, so you could draw an ellipse, create the sides, and then draw the bottom ellipse here. Whatever feels easier for you. I find it easier to do it this first way, drawing the ellipse. Another ellipse, you're trying to get it the same. And then making any corrections, so that one went a little bit too big. We could do one with a different angle of the opening, so it's the same as the cubes. This one here you can see more of the top, this one here you can see less of the top. If we're looking at a cylinder, like this can here, when we're higher above it we can see more of the top. When it's closer to our eye line we can maybe only see a sliver of the top part of it. So let's do one where we can only just see the top, really narrow opening at the top, surface at the top. So this bottom edge here and this top edge should be parallel. So if you have two ellipses that are different sizes, they are not going to be parallel, or that are different proportions. So I'll give you an example of that. Say I do quite an open one here and then a very narrow one here. It's going to look weird, it doesn't work. So we need to have the same proportions for each ellipse. If you're correcting something, just draw straight over top and then rub out the lines that you don't need. So hopefully that made sense with the cylinders. You know how to draw cylinders. If you're really struggling with that loose ellipse, you can use our sketching marks. Might take a little bit longer, you might have to do some more corrections, but you lose the freshness of that rhythm that you get. It's actually, I find it a little bit harder to do it this way because I can't get each side exactly the same. You see this one's sharper, this one's blunter. Whereas if I'm doing it like this, it just sort of naturally evens out on each side. So we've done cubes, we've done cylinders, and there's one other main shape that we're going to work with, and that is cones. And we're thinking about cones that have a base to them as well. It's very similar to a cylinder, but the two ellipses are going to be different sizes. They're going to be the same proportions, so the height versus the width will be the same. The same type of shape, I guess, is one way of thinking about it. You see, this one is smaller than this one, but it's like I've just shrunk this one down. I haven't changed the shape of it. And then we can join the two sides. So again, we don't want to have these two ellipses be different shapes. I'll show you what I mean. And if we have quite an open ellipse and then we have a very narrow ellipse, that one actually doesn't look too bad, but generally it won't work, so let's do a really narrow one here. There's something wrong with it because the shapes aren't the same. So let's do an upside down cone. We're going to do an ellipse here, try and get that same rhythm going, but just on a smaller scale. Ellipse at the top, and then join them together. We could do a very narrow cone. Sometimes it helps to draw a centre line, and then you know where the centre of the top ellipse needs to be. And let's draw one where we can, it's very close to our eye level. We can only just see the top of it. So it's going to be a very narrow ellipse on the bottom and a very narrow ellipse on the top. Make some corrections if you need to, going over top. Okay, there's one more shape that I'm going to show you. These are the main ones, but we're also going to have a go at drawing a dome shape. Sometimes it's useful for things like cups, that sort of nice dome at the bottom, and bowls, things like that. So we're going to start off the same way we did for the cylinders and the cones. We're going to draw an ellipse, and then we're just going to curve over the top here. Maybe you can get a rhythm going like this as well. That's an upside down one. We'll do one that's open at the top, a little bit like a bowl. Draw the ellipse. Might help to put a line through the center if that helps you. And then draw that dome shape at the bottom. You see I tend to come down from each side. I come from this side down, and then I come down from this side. Just find it's easier to get them even than you starting here and then coming up all the way to that side. We'll do a dome where we can't see much of the top. Let's do a really wide dome. This is where you've really got to work from that elbow, swinging that pencil around, and very lightly until you get the right rhythm. So it's almost like you're just ghosting the line first, trying it out, and then once you get the right rhythm, you commit to it. So we've done cubes, we've done cylinders, we've done cones, and we've done domes. Have a look at these. Think about where you might need to improve. Did you find the domes particularly difficult? Then maybe next time you're doing a bit of practice, you do a page of domes and just get used to using those ellipses. Remember, when you're correcting, see if you can do it without erasing anything, especially not erasing anything first. If you make the corrections while you've still got those errors in there, then you can see what you've done. You can see where you've made a correction. Now that we've done those basic shapes, I'm going to give you a little project to do that you can practice in your own time, just to really get the feel for drawing these shapes quickly and naturally. When we're drawing from observation and we're using those simple shapes, there's going to be some objects that are just one shape, like the cube here, like the can, it's just a cylinder. But there are also going to be objects or subjects that are made up of a bunch of shapes joined together. And so that's what we're going to do for this assignment here. We're simply going to take those 4 basic shapes. We did the cube, the cylinder, the cone, and the dome. And we're going to start joining them together, and you can join them together however you like. So there's room for some creativity here. So I might start with a cube. And then we're going to construct some other kind of object by joining another shape to it. So I might put a cone on the top. It doesn't have to be a real object, it's just something that you're making up. And then you could join as many shapes together as you want. You might want to start with just 2 shapes. So we could do a cylinder, we could put a cone on the top of that. We could put an upside down cone on the top of that one. Let's do something with a dome shape. So let's do, say, a cylinder with a dome shape on the top instead of a cone. Make sure these lines are parallel. And then here's our dome is going to go on the top here. You could put any of these on top of a cube if you want to. So fill up your page constructing just odd little objects out of more than one simple shape. If you've got a good mind for 3D shapes, you might be able to build a structure that has maybe 5 or 6 different shapes that are all joined together or stacked on top of each other. But if you're finding that a little bit difficult, just keep it to 2 shapes for each imaginary object that you draw. If you are drawing stacks of objects like this, it's usually best to keep all of your angles going in the same direction. So you can see all of these angles are moving back into space in the same direction. You can do them the opposite way, but sometimes it gets a little bit confusing. One little bonus part to this lesson is to draw a cube not facing the front but facing the corner. And I have a couple of videos on 1 and 2 point perspective that might be useful for you as well. But for now, if you want to give this a go, we're going to just draw the corner of the box first. So this is the corner that's facing us here. And then we're going to have an angle going up to one side, angle going up to the other side. And it's the same principle as the basic cubes we're doing. The lines have to be parallel. So when we add in this top part here, this line has to be parallel to this one, and this back edge here has to be parallel to that one there. All these verticals are parallel. So that's something you could try. Again, you can think about, well, how much of the top surface can be seen. Maybe you can only see a little bit of the top surface, in which case the angles are going to be very slight. And how much of each side can you see as well? So you might be able to see more of this side, less of this side. And then when we draw in the top surface, this back edge here needs to be parallel with this one. A bit tricky, this one here. And this back edge here needs to be parallel with this one. Sometimes it takes a little bit of playing around until you get those angles right. So that's another thing that you can have a go at if you want to. If you still feel like you're just trying to get your head around how to draw a basic cube where you can see the front of it like this, then just stick with that for now. But this is just a little bit extra if you want to push yourself. If anything looks wonky, so say I do this one like this, it's very wonky. The thing that will have gone wrong is you will have one angle or 2 angles that aren't parallel. So remember, all of these verticals are the same, all of the angles going this way are the same, and the angles going this way should be the same. So that one's not, that one's almost horizontal, so it needs to be the same as this. So if you get stuck, something doesn't look right, just check your angles, make sure they're all the same. You can do that with your pencil as well. So you've got plenty to practice there. Have a look, see where your weaknesses are. Do you need to practice domes or cubes or cones or cylinders? And just do as many pages as you want of those over and over again. You can even do them over top if you don't want to waste paper. Just do them over top of the drawings that you've already done until that movement feels really natural and you can whip one up really quickly. Next lesson, we're going to start actually looking at some objects and applying these shapes, and then figuring out how do we make them look, natural. So not like these shapes that we've done here, but how do we make them look like the actual objects that we want to draw. If you want to, you can share your drawings with me and with everyone else just by going to my Facebook page, thepencilroomonline.com, and there will be a post with this video, and underneath that is where you can upload your pictures if you want to share them or if you want to see what other people are doing. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Don't miss out on the next classes in this series of Learn to Draw classes for beginners. Keep practicing, and I hope you'll join me in the next lesson.